So the highest ranked 21st century film on the list is this one, In the Mood for Love, directed by the immensely celebrated Wong Kar-Wai. Whilst I can share a strong affection for this film, its director has not always equally impressed me. At this stage, In the Mood for Love is Kar-Wai's most praised picture, which is not always necessarily the case. At one time it was Days of Being Wild and Chungking Express, which were the most widely championed of Kar-Wai's filmography. Here I'll have to confess a distinct preference for the current discourse, wherein In the Mood for Love, or Fallen Angels, or Happy Together stand as possibly the most discussed of Kar-Wai's features. Unfortunately, two of the most acclaimed films which I genuinely feel to fall short of the hype are Days of Being Wild and Chungking Express. The former is a lavish soap opera that gets away with so much nonsense due to it being perceived by Oriental as outcasts in the Western world as somehow sublime drama, even though the Western Europeans stopped being able to get away with this years ago, and Chungking Express is admirable to an extent, but far too sentimental, proudly saccharine, and again appealing to a Westerner's condescending mystical idealization of the further East. I just find it inevitably, undeniably dull. I don't understand why these films get away with narrative attributes we'd scoff at in the English language or even dismiss it if it arose from Europe itself. At this time, at this place, we'll meet again and go on a date, even though I'm a relentless jerk to you, and I'll go and cry to my aunt figure for not revealing details about my real parents. Days of Being Wild is such tosh. A teen heartthrob's dramatic turn after his supporting role in John Woo's shoot-em-ups. I'm not taken with celebrity worship. I find it distracting. I find that when it is central to a film's appeal, I want to be taken with the exaltation of a specific performer. It really hurts that particular film for me. I have less to whine about with Chungking Express, but I don't think I like that anthology 90s era flicks in general. I don't know if his subpar Jarmusch, if that were ever were a thing at that time. I'll mention that Wong Kar-Wai also delivered outstanding masterly cinema with 1994's Ashes of Time, and I do like 2046 overall, but I find his priorities sometimes narratively, cinematographically, to be just baffling. Blueberry Nights was a failure. The Grandmaster was a letdown, arguably a complete embarrassment. He has fallen off hard, and his reputation isn't what it was 10 years ago, I have personally felt. Yet, In the Mood for Love does live up to the hype. I found it a bit difficult to really get into this film when I first became exposed to it as a later adolescent. Too reliant on emotions, generally slow-paced, more interested in true-to-life dramatic evocation than a visceral set of impactful, in-your-face moments. A film one had to admire for its more abstracted accomplishments unless they truly felt the complexities of adult human relationships, which as an 18 or so year old, you really, really don't. And there's no point pretending that you do. Though it isn't entirely impossible for the 18 and a half or 19 to 20 year old to begin to understand, especially if they are aware of the film's priorities and accept it for what it is, and choose to admire its choices and not feel disappointed that it is an action-heavy Kurosawa, luminously colourful Zhang Yimou, or the unforgettable intensity of the newer South Korean legends, Park Chan-wook, Bong Joon-ho, Na Hong-jin, et al. If one is really considering the photographic finesse of the composition, the seamless, believable behaviour of its actors, and the uniquely filmic qualities of its narrative distillation, it is a film which entirely feels like the work of a daunting genius. One could not have realised in a literary effort the glowing absence of the initially unfaithful spouses, and on a stage drama it would seem even more so gimmicky and obvious, as it could have been in the hands of a less experienced film director. Here, Kar-Wai has whittled down the focus of his drama, knowing quite well that an emphasis on the unfaithful partners would unavoidably distract from the plot's focus on Leong and Cheong's roles. He has excised their mostly visual presence from the feature entirely, and it illustrates the dramatic psychological sensations which these two players are beset by. These individuals that they have married, they cease to matter. They cease to be involved in their cheated spouses' lives, and so the past for prior obligations melt away, and Mrs. Chan and Chow, Chiang and Leong respectively, are in a world all their own, and once we experience their ethereal bond, the absence of the other from the player's present is intense and overt. It defines their experiences in the remainder of the film as far as we the viewers are concerned. It is a film that requires patience from the average viewer, an open-mindedness where its unique dramatic priorities might be concerned, and a willingness to believe that people can feel things without any stiff upper lip conditioning, and also still choose to try and repress those feelings, once they vulnerably emerge. Some might cynically feel as though that this doesn't reflect the real world, but for a certain dimension of the business class of the post-war 20th century, this was reality. But it might not reflect suburban, gregarious homeowner functioning alcoholism in the developed Western world's problem, and the film is all the better for depicting a historical moment wherein the cynical hunger for money and status was not unreal, but was considered impolite to brashly display, and so humans had to navigate coming across as respectful whilst corralling a swell of emotions that might impede your designated function in a supposedly honourable, institutional, and ordered society. And do not consider the time and place of In the Mood for Love as solely reflective of Hong Kong or Asia. A period piece set in 1962 in England, America, parts of Europe, or prospectively Latin America could distill similar concerns. Consider the likes of Ivory's Remains of the Day, Haynes's Far From Heaven, or even to some extent certain of Eric Romer's features, the insistence of respectability to ground one's love arrangements or affairs to reflect well upon them in the wider bourgeois social palette. Now, that being said, even the most superficial viewer might enjoy Maggie Cheung walking up the stairs, and really cannot be blamed for doing so, though any accusations of Emperor's New Clothes or forced profundity might be expected during the film's final quarter. It is clear that Kar-Wai is confident in the emotional affect this film could be having on an eager audience by the latter stages of the screenplay, and is certainly relying on pre-existing expectations of romantic tragedy and heartbreaking fiction most audiences are inherently familiar with. Is the ending of In the Mood for Love significantly more poignant than the ending of, say, Scorsese's The Age of Innocence, or the aforementioned Ivory's The Remains of the Day? I feel as though it is, because the drama felt more lived in, believable, and compelling than in Even Remains of the Day, possibly. Although the notion of heartbreak, loss, and regret in the cinema is hardly a revelation or it's absolutely a familiar environment to anyone who has seen enough of the medium's grand history. Try Casablanca, The Third Man, and, well, Citizen Kane, to observe how in the 40s it became hard to top the formative classics in that certain respect. And maybe I'm speaking too much from my own experiences, but, Casablanca, Third Man, and Citizen Kane, I'd seen those. You check those out pretty early, right? Like, I'd seen those long before I'd seen In the Mood for Love, at least. Regardless, I will feel the compulsion to name In the Mood for Love a masterpiece, my second favourite Wong Kar-Wai film behind Ashes of Time. One of the most photographically accomplished, expertly performed, and carefully written film dramas or romantic exercises of all time, the stuff of major legend, and a title which you may feel a little bit rote about being such an admirer of, but just imagine this was some film an associate of yours made, no one else aware of it. You'd think, mate, I think you might have composed a masterpiece. Forget the hype. Sit down with In the Mood for Love. With the hype in tow, one sooner identifies out of a great curiosity where the genius and power of the film manifests in your mind. Though even without it, it is the kind of impactful memory which sneaks up on you, reveals itself as unforgettable over time, and emerges as one of the most impressive films you'd ever seen the more you inevitably remember it. I don't know if it would be my pick for the finest film of the 21st century thus far, but it might be the best film of 2000 along with that Jonas Mekas picture, and I'm very fond of Gakuru Ishii's Gojo Spirit War Chronicle too, although I do feel as though In the Mood for Love is a rather worthy candidate in any instance. Hope you enjoyed it. Sped up here. Now, once again, thanks very, very much yet again.